Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced, and welcome to another episode of Select Star from Data Lake. And what I want to talk about today is data sharing in Dremio. So, if you're not familiar with Dremio, Dremio is a data lakehouse platform. It allows you to kind of connect all your different data sources, kind of be able to query them, curate data, deliver data, share data, all in one platform. Now, data sharing can be sometimes a very sort of amorphous term as far as what people mean, but oftentimes you generally mean one of two things: sharing data with compute and sharing data without compute. Meaning, I'm giving you access to the data, but you have to bring your own compute. Meaning, you have to bring your own tool to actually query, scan the data. With Dremio, both are possible. Now, again, Dremio, we're talking about lakehouse architecture. So Dremio doesn't actually store any of the data. Your data is within the many different sources that you connect. So you have to kind of, if you understand that, then you can understand how data sharing becomes very possible. Now, data sharing with compute built right into the platform very easily. Basically, with your Dremio cluster, you're able to create users. Users always start off with zero access to anything, and then you'd be able to just grant them access to the data sets you want, okay? And thus share data in that regard. So basically, if I have a data set that I want to share, I can create that person a user for my Dremio cluster, give the proper access to the data sets that I want to that user, and then that user can either log into Dremio, use Dremio's REST API, use Apache Aeroflight, use JDBC or DBC. It doesn't matter how they connect to Dremio. Basically, when they use those credentials, they're limited only to the data sets that we've granted them access to. Okay, and this is how many people will share data internally and externally when they share with like partners and clients. Sometimes what people will do is they will create a user that represents sort of a collection of people they want to share data with that all fit within the same amount of permissions they want to have. And what they do is they'll create like a external application. So they'll sit there and say, okay, hey, this is the customer user. The customer should be able to see these data sets. And then they build an application that provides the interface to that data, essentially creating a data application. So people aren't even aware that they're using Dremio as they peruse the data. But that's with compute. So basically there you can share data from any data set. So from any database, data warehouse, data lake that you can connect to Dremio, all of that can be shared pretty easily and collaborated on. Okay, a little bit more different is sharing data without compute. Okay, now each source is going to have a different story, but one of the integrated stories is that Dremio, particularly Dremio Cloud, has an integrated catalog. Okay, in this case, it's powered by an open source project called Nessie. So essentially, any tables, since it's an integrated catalog, essentially what you can do is that same user credentials can access that catalog if you give it the permission to. But since it's a open source Nessie catalog, it's separate from sort of the Dremio software, so it can be accessed by external engines. So I could go bring it up in Spark, I could go bring it up in Trino, Presto, whatnot, and then query the tables that are cataloged in that catalog without necessarily using the same Dremio compute of that particular Dremio project, giving you the ability to share data, but allow whoever you share the data with to bring their own compute. Okay, and now that Nessie is about to institute the REST catalog interface for Iceberg, that's going to connect to even more tools, including like PyIceberg, which is generally going to be what kind of allows things like pandas, polars, DuckDB to kind of work with Iceberg behind the scenes. So you're going to see it's going to become easier and easier to just sort of do a lot of stuff with that Nessie catalog using the REST catalog API. But essentially what you would do is that, again, when you're using the integrated catalog into Dremio, so this is different than just a standalone open source Nessie. Because if you stand your own Nessie server, then you would separately create credentials on the Nessie server and then give those to users. But if it's integrated into Dremio, then it's the same as the users you have on your Dremio platform. So you would just say, hey, create credentials, give them access to the catalog, and then they can bring that to the tool that they want, use their own compute to then access those tables, strictly those Iceberg tables. So again, one of the benefits of actually having data lakehouse, and this is not too distinct from something like a delta sharing. So delta sharing is essentially you set up a server that allows you to broadcast your delta lake tables. This isn't really necessary in Iceberg because catalogs essentially serve that role. They become the tool of discoverability. You would just need to give people credentials to access that catalog. Okay, and then that catalog should have some security features, which Nessie does, and then you probably see similar security features in upcoming catalogs. But essentially, that's kind of how you would do the sharing without compute. You would just share the catalog. If it was Delta Lake tables, you'd probably use something like Delta sharing. If we're talking about databases and data warehouses, well, they're going to all have, you essentially would give them credentials to the database. Because again, that's a whole, it's a separate platform, separate from the Dremio platform. But again, you can give access to everything with compute by creating a user on Dremio and granting access to any data set from any source to Dremio. But the point is, data sharing is possible, and it's actually pretty easy. It just depends on what you're trying to do. If you don't mind sharing your compute, you can share access to everything. If you don't want to share compute, then have it as iceberg tables in your integrated catalog, and then set credentials to the catalog, giving them access to that catalog and the tables in that catalog that you want them to have access to. And then but either way, you're creating a new Dremio user, and that Dremio user will have its credentials, and that makes it really easy to share data with anybody. Now, Dremio does not have a public data marketplace like a Snowflake or an AWS, but because it can connect to S3, because it can connect to Snowflake, you can take advantage of those marketplaces. Okay, and then because Snowflake supports iceberg tables and the REST catalog API, tables that you curate in your integrated Dremio catalog will likely be able to be shared in the Snowflake marketplace in the future because they're iceberg tables. So you'll have a lot of avenues for data sharing in the Dremio platform because it's flexible. That's the benefit of using open formats, using sort of open architecture, designing things in a way where everything's sort of very modular, open, using open interfaces like Apache Aeroflight, like the Apache Iceberg REST catalog, like the Apache Iceberg format, using all these sort of very open standards that make everything very, very interoperable. But hopefully you guys enjoyed that discussion. I'll see you all later. Have a great day and enjoy.